For years, one question quietly haunted royal watchers. What really happened to one of Diana, Princess of Wales's most recognizable tiaras after her death? Because while the world believed some of her most treasured jewels were locked away in royal vaults, whispers inside palace circles suggested something far more disturbing. A former royal jeweler reportedly claimed the missing piece never vanished at all. According to that explosive allegation, the tiara may have been sitting much closer to the throne than anyone imagined, in the possession of Queen Camilla the entire time. And if that claim is true, it could reopen one of the most uncomfortable chapters in modern royal history. But the deeper question is even more chilling. Was this simply royal protocol, or something much more personal? By the time the world knew Diana, Princess of Wales, as the people's princess, the royal family already understood something dangerous. She was no longer simply a young woman who had married into the monarchy. She had become something much bigger than the institution itself. And inside palace walls, that kind of popularity could quietly become a problem. From the outside, Diana's life seemed like a fairy tale. She wore glittering gowns. She stepped out of royal cars smiling. Crowds screamed her name everywhere she went. But behind those polished photographs was a very different story. One lesser-known fact is that Diana often felt more comfortable speaking to hospital patients and homeless children than she did speaking to senior members of the royal household. Former aides said she could walk into a crowded ward and instantly connect with strangers. Yet inside the palace, she sometimes felt painfully alone. That contrast made her even more fascinating to the public. And it also made her unforgettable. Among the many treasures linked to Diana, few captured attention like the jewels she wore. Some pieces came from the crown. Others came from the Spencer family. But one particular tiara slowly became surrounded by mystery after her death in 1997. At first, no one noticed. That was because royal jewelry rarely makes front-page news unless something feels wrong. Most people assumed her pieces had been carefully catalogued and stored, just as royal protocol required. That would have been normal. That would have made sense. But years later, royal watchers began noticing something strange. Several famous jewels associated with Diana had clear histories. Her sapphire engagement ring reappeared on the hand of Catherine, Princess of Wales. Other pieces were seen in exhibitions or official archives. Yet one tiara seemed to vanish without explanation. And in the royal family, objects do not simply disappear. Every major jewel is documented. Every diamond has a record. Every piece has a chain of custody. That is why whispers began quietly spreading among royal insiders. Some believed the tiara had been locked away because it carried too much emotional weight. Others believed something far more unsettling. They believed the jewel had never disappeared at all. Then came the rumor that changed everything. A former royal jeweler reportedly claimed the missing tiara had remained inside royal circles for years. Not in a vault. Not in permanent storage. But much closer to the throne than anyone imagined. And according to that explosive allegation, the woman connected to it was none other than Queen Camilla. If that was true, this was no longer just about a missing royal jewel. It was about a secret the palace may have been hiding in plain sight. And the deeper people looked, the more troubling the story became. Inside the royal family, jewels have never been just decoration. To the public, a tiara may look like a beautiful piece of history. But inside palace walls, every diamond can carry meaning. And sometimes, that meaning can be deeply personal. That is what made the mystery around Diana's missing tiara so unsettling. When Diana, Princess of Wales, first entered royal life, she quickly learned that the monarchy spoke in symbols. A brooch could signal loyalty. A necklace could honor a past queen. And a tiara could quietly reveal who held influence behind closed doors. Even the smallest jewel could send a message without a single word being spoken. Most people never realize that many royal jewels are not privately owned in the way ordinary families own heirlooms. Some pieces belong to the monarch personally. Others are part of a royal collection that is passed from one generation to the next. And some sit in a gray area that only palace lawyers truly understand. That legal confusion has protected more than one royal secret over the years. After Diana's death in Paris in 1997, the royal household moved quickly. Her clothing was sorted. Her letters were reviewed. Personal possessions were quietly documented. And according to several royal biographers, palace staff worked behind the scenes to decide which items would remain private and which would eventually become part of royal history. That process appeared ordinary on the surface. But some insiders later hinted that one jewel was handled differently. According to reports that surfaced years later, a former palace jeweler claimed one tiara linked closely to Diana was removed from the normal inventory review. That detail shocked royal watchers because royal collections are usually managed with extreme precision. Even damaged pieces are tracked carefully. A missing item would immediately raise concern inside the royal household. Yet somehow, this one seemed to fade into silence. Some believed the reason was emotional. Diana's image had become larger than the monarchy itself after her death. Crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace with flowers stretching for miles. The grief was unlike anything the royal family had faced in modern times. Anything tied to her suddenly carried enormous public sensitivity. And that may have been exactly why the tiara became complicated. One lesser-known fact is that some royal items can be quietly withdrawn from public use if palace advisors believe they could create controversy. The public rarely hears about those decisions. They happen privately, often among a small circle of trusted staff. And once that silence begins, it can last for years. But the story became darker when another claim emerged. The same jeweler reportedly suggested the tiara had not been destroyed, sold, or lost. Instead, it had remained inside the royal collection under restricted access. And over time, that access may have shifted toward Camilla. At first, that sounded impossible to many people. For Diana's supporters, the idea felt almost unthinkable. Camilla had long been viewed by many as the woman whose relationship with then Charles III had helped destroy Diana's marriage. To imagine her connected to one of Diana's most symbolic jewels felt deeply emotional. But inside royal tradition, emotions and protocol do not always move in the same direction. As Camilla's role inside the monarchy grew stronger, her access to senior royal jewels naturally expanded. That part was expected. Senior women in the monarchy often wear pieces from previous generations. It had happened before. And from a constitutional point of view, it could happen again. Yet this was different. Because this was not just another tiara. This was a piece linked to a woman the world still mourned. And if the reports were true, someone inside the palace had decided the public should never know. The question was no longer whether the tiara existed. The real question was who made the decision to hide it. And even more importantly, why? By the time the rumors about the missing tiara began spreading beyond royal circles, the jewel itself was no longer the only issue. What truly unsettled people was what the story seemed to reveal about the family behind the crown. Because inside the monarchy, scandals rarely stay about one object. Sooner or later, they become about relationships. And in this case, the whispers around one missing piece of jewelry seemed to expose emotional fractures the royal family had spent years trying to hide. To the public, the royal family often appears united. They stand together on palace balconies. They smile at ceremonies. They wave during national celebrations. But royal history has shown again and again that private pain often sits behind public perfection. And Diana's memory remained one of the deepest fault lines of all. Even decades after her death, Diana, Princess of Wales, still cast a long shadow over the House of Windsor. Her image remained everywhere. Documentaries replayed her interviews. Photographs of her continued appearing on magazine covers. And millions of people still saw her as the royal who changed everything. That meant any object connected to her carried emotional power. And no one understood that better than her sons. Prince William and Prince Harry grew up not only mourning their mother, but watching the world mourn her too. They were children when cameras followed them behind her coffin. They were teenagers when strangers still spoke about her as if she had just died. And as adults, they inherited not only her legacy, but the burden of protecting it. That is why the rumors surrounding the tiara felt so personal. One lesser-known fact about royal inheritances is that emotional ownership and legal ownership are often very different things. An item can legally belong to the crown while still feeling deeply personal to surviving family members. And when those two ideas collide, tension can quietly build for years. Some royal insiders claimed that Diana's belongings were never a simple subject inside the family. Certain pieces were considered too sensitive to discuss openly. Some items were viewed as historical. Others were viewed as private, and deciding which was which could create silent resentment. The engagement ring was one example. When William gave Diana's sapphire ring to Catherine, Princess of Wales, the moment was seen as deeply moving. To the public, it looked like a tribute. A son honoring his mother. A future queen carrying part of Diana into a new generation. But that gesture also raised uncomfortable questions. If one of Diana's most famous jewels had been intentionally preserved for the future, then what happened to the pieces that were not seen again? And who decided their fate? Some royal observers believed William may have preferred that certain items remain untouched out of respect. Others believed the palace viewed royal jewels as institutional property first, sentiment second. Those two perspectives may sound small from the outside. Inside a family, they can become enormous. The presence of Queen Camilla made everything more complicated. By the time Camilla became queen, years of careful public rehabilitation had softened some criticism. She had gradually moved from controversial outsider to accepted senior royal. The palace worked slowly to rebuild her image. And for many people, that strategy succeeded. But for Diana's most loyal supporters, some wounds never closed. To them, any suggestion that Camilla had access to a tiara linked to Diana felt more than insensitive. It felt symbolic. Almost like history itself had shifted. And symbols matter in royal life. One former palace aide once said that royal households often argue over meaning more than objects. Because in that world, what something represents can matter more than what it actually is. A tiara is never just diamonds. Sometimes it becomes memory. That may explain why no one wanted to speak publicly. Because even if no confrontation ever happened openly, the emotional consequences could still be real. Some believed Harry would have seen the issue differently than William. Harry has spoken openly about his distrust of palace systems. He has repeatedly suggested that the institution often protects itself before protecting family. That perspective made some royal watchers wonder whether stories like this helped deepen his sense of alienation long before he left royal life. And that possibility gave the missing tiara a darker meaning. Because it may not have simply revealed an old mystery. It may have exposed a family still struggling with the ghost of Diana. The palace could manage headlines. It could manage photographs. It could manage appearances. But some divisions cannot be managed forever. And behind the polished image of royal unity, a deeper question remained. Was the missing tiara really the end of an old scandal? Or was it proof that the royal family had never truly escaped it? By the time the story of Diana's missing tiara began spreading beyond royal gossip circles, the palace was no longer dealing with a simple rumor. It was facing something far more dangerous. A question about ownership. And inside the monarchy, ownership can become one of the most sensitive subjects of all. To most people, a royal jewel seems simple. Someone wears it. It belongs to them. That feels logical. But royal law has never worked that way. Some jewels are considered private property. Others are part of the sovereign's personal collection. And some belong to what experts call the royal trust, objects that pass through generations but are never truly owned by one individual. That distinction sounds technical, but it can completely change who controls a piece after someone dies. That was the heart of the controversy. If the tiara had been Diana's personal possession, many believed it should have passed directly into the control of her sons. But if the palace considered it part of the wider royal collection, then the reigning monarch could legally decide who wore it next. That single legal question changed everything. One lesser-known fact is that the British royal household has historically avoided public court battles over family property whenever possible. Private disputes are usually handled quietly by royal advisors. Documents are sealed. Meetings happen behind closed doors. And public transparency is often kept to a minimum. That strategy protects the institution. But it can also create suspicion. As the tiara rumors spread, legal experts in the British press began discussing what would happen if a disputed royal jewel became a public issue. Some argued the monarchy had complete authority over inherited ceremonial pieces. Others said anything strongly associated with Diana carried a moral obligation beyond legal paperwork. That distinction mattered. Because even if the palace had the legal right to move the tiara, the public might still see it as a betrayal. And public opinion has become one of the monarchy's most fragile vulnerabilities. After Diana's death, the royal family learned a painful lesson. The institution could survive scandal, but it could not ignore public emotion. When crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace in 1997, the monarchy faced one of the worst public relations crises in modern royal history. People did not simply mourn Diana. Some openly blamed the institution for failing her. That memory never fully disappeared. So when whispers emerged that a deeply symbolic jewel may have ended up within Queen Camilla's reach, old feelings returned. Online forums exploded. Royal commentators argued for weeks. Some viewers called it harmless protocol. Others called it deeply disrespectful. And the palace once again chose silence. No formal inventory was released. No legal explanation was offered. No direct denial came from royal officials. That silence had consequences. Because in the absence of facts, speculation fills the gap. Some believed lawyers advised the palace to say nothing because even a denial could create legal complications. If the palace acknowledged the tiara publicly, it might invite questions about the handling of other royal assets. And once those questions begin, they can spread quickly. That may explain why officials remained careful. One surprising legal fact is that members of the royal family have historically used private agreements rather than public law to settle disputes involving inheritance. These arrangements can remain confidential for decades. Sometimes the public never learns the full terms. That secrecy can protect royal privacy. But it can also deepen mistrust. For Prince William and Prince Harry, the issue may have been more personal than legal. Because for them, Diana was not a historical figure. She was their mother. And anything connected to her carried emotional meaning no legal document could erase. Some royal watchers believed William would avoid making the issue public because he has always protected the institution. Others believed Harry, who has repeatedly challenged palace secrecy, may have seen the situation very differently. That possibility made the story even more explosive. Because if the tiara controversy touched old family wounds, it could become more than a jewelry dispute. It could become another symbol of a family still divided by Diana's memory. And that is where the backlash became larger than the jewel itself. The public was no longer asking only where the tiara had been. They were asking something much bigger. If the monarchy could not be transparent about something so symbolic, what else had been quietly handled behind palace doors? And for the royal family, that question may have been far more dangerous than the missing tiara itself. Because scandals over objects can fade. But questions about trust can last for generations. And just as the palace tried to contain the controversy, a new fear began to emerge. What if this was not the last secret waiting to surface? By the time the rumors about Diana's missing tiara had spread across royal circles, tabloids, and online forums, the story had become much larger than a single piece of jewelry. It had become a story about memory. And in the British monarchy, memory can be more powerful than law. For decades, the royal family has survived because it understands one simple truth. Public opinion can rise and fall. Scandals can come and go. Headlines eventually disappear. But some stories never truly die. And the story of Diana, Princess of Wales, has never disappeared. Even years after her death, Diana remained one of the most emotionally powerful figures in modern royal history. New generations who were not even alive when she died still know her face. Still know her voice. Still know the pain that seemed to follow her through palace corridors. That is what made the missing tiara feel different. It was never just about diamonds. It was about what those diamonds represented. To many people, the tiara symbolized a chapter of royal history that the palace had never fully confronted. A chapter of betrayal. A chapter of silence. And a chapter many believed had been carefully rewritten. And as those rumors grew louder, the palace faced a difficult choice. Speak. Or remain silent. Historically, the monarchy almost always chooses silence. One lesser-known fact is that royal households often believe that time can bury stories better than direct confrontation ever could. Officials know that many scandals lose momentum when the palace refuses to engage. Some stories fade in weeks. Others fade in years. But Diana's story never followed normal rules. Because people never stopped caring. That changed everything. Royal insiders reportedly understood that publicly addressing the tiara could create more problems than solving it. If officials confirmed the jewel's location, it could trigger demands for transparency about other pieces linked to Diana. If they denied the claims, they risked creating headlines that would dominate global news for days. And if they said nothing, the mystery would continue. So once again, silence won. No detailed statement was released from Buckingham Palace. No inventory was shown. No royal spokesperson offered a clear explanation. Just the same polished appearances. The same ceremonies. The same carefully managed image. From the outside, nothing changed. But privately, many believed something had. Because every unresolved royal controversy leaves a mark inside the institution, even when the public never sees it. For Queen Camilla, the rumors became another reminder that her place in royal history would always be compared to Diana's. No matter how many years passed, no matter how carefully her public role was rebuilt, no matter how firmly she stood beside Charles III, that comparison never disappeared. And perhaps it never could. For William, the issue carried a different weight. As the future king, he has spent years trying to balance two impossible responsibilities: protect his mother's legacy, and protect the institution she once struggled inside. That balance has never been easy. Every tribute to Diana strengthens her memory. But every reminder of her pain also reopens old questions about the monarchy itself. That may be why some royal observers believe William has always handled Diana's legacy with extreme care. Not just as a son, but as a future monarch. And then there was Harry. Because if anyone understood the emotional cost of royal silence, many believed it was him. Harry has repeatedly described feeling that the institution often protects itself before protecting the people inside it. That theme has appeared in interviews, documentaries, and public statements. And to some royal watchers, the missing tiara story felt like another example of the same pattern. Whether that was true or not, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. A woman beloved by millions. A missing royal jewel. A palace that refused to explain. And a family still shaped by grief decades later. That combination was powerful. Because in royal life, symbolism can sometimes become more important than reality. One remarkable fact about royal history is that objects often outlive the people who made them famous. Crowns pass from one ruler to another. Necklaces move between queens. Tiaras return to the vault and emerge years later on different heads. But some jewels carry emotional fingerprints. And Diana's did. That is why this story refused to fade. Not because anyone proved a crime. Not because any official scandal was confirmed. But because the mystery touched something deeper. Trust. And once trust begins to crack, even the strongest institution can feel fragile. The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, divorces, public humiliation, family betrayals. But modern royal survival depends on something older monarchies never faced in the same way: public belief. And every unanswered question can weaken that belief. That may be the true legacy of the missing tiara story. Not whether Camilla ever had it. Not whether the palace hid it. Not whether a jeweler exposed the truth. But whether the public still believes the monarchy tells the truth at all. Because sometimes the most damaging royal scandal is not what people can prove. It is what people begin to suspect. And in the case of Diana's missing tiara, that suspicion may be the one thing the palace can never lock away again. The mystery of Diana's missing tiara may never receive a clear answer. And perhaps that is why the story still matters. Because the royal family has always depended on carefully managed appearances. But behind every polished image, there are private decisions the public never sees. And sometimes those hidden choices become more powerful than the official story itself. For many people, this was never really about a tiara. It was about Diana, her memory, and the fear that parts of her story may still be hidden behind palace walls. So what do you think? Was this simply royal tradition being misunderstood? Or was it another example of how the monarchy protects itself at any cost? If you want more royal secrets, hidden scandals, and untold palace stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.